Hey everyone, welcome to First Tuesdays with Heart. It's Tuesday, July 1, and I don't know how we're this far into the year. Um, First Tuesdays is sponsored by the Heart Peer Support Team in connection with the Resiliency and Justice Center. HEART stands for Healing, Empowering, and Rebuilding Together. We're a peer support program for anyone impacted by any mass violence incident. Real quick, before we wanted to introduce our HEART team. Alice Goldstein is a licensed professional counselor. She's a co-founder and co-director of the Heart Peer Support Program, and she is also the support group facilitator for Route 91 and UNLV. Jackie, who is our presenter tonight, is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's the behavioral health program coordinator for the Resiliency and Justice Center. She's one of our original Heart coaches, and she is a facilitator for the Route 91 and both third Tuesdays and our new fourth Thursday, with Heart support group meeting. And I'm Jill Winter. I'm co-founder and co-director of the Heart Peer Support Program. I'm a Route 91 survivor. I assist Alice with the UNLV support group, and I assist Jackie with third Tuesdays and fourth Thursdays with Heart. So actually, Jen shared this one with us, and we thought this was perfect for tonight's topic because there's so many things that grief is. It's dreading holidays, it's deep sadness, it's sleepless nights, it's feeling abandoned, loss of job. There's so many things that covers grief, and um, just there is you can find meaning behind a lot of it. So many of you have met Jackie or seen her present, but we are thrilled to have her back with us presenting. As I mentioned, she's a licensed marriage and family therapist. She is also a retired drug and alcohol counselor. She's been serving the Vegas area for over 35 years. She was one of the first to respond immediately after rout and then partnered with the then Vegas Strong Resiliency Center to help routers, and continues to work with routers in private practice in addition to her job with the Resiliency and Justice Center. Um, she was initially the behavioral health program consultant, and in 2023, she became the center's behavioral health program coordinator, working with Route 91, UNLV, all victims of crime in Nevada, and anyone impacted by mass violence. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie.
As Jill indicated, I'm Jackie Harris, licensed marriage and family therapist, behavioral health program coordinator. So obviously tonight's topic is grief, loss, and finding meaning. I kind of joke around a little bit that I don't have a PhD, but if I did, I think it would be in grief and loss, primarily because of my own personal experiences, and of course, where my work and my career has led me. Before we get started, one of the things that is important is that I would certainly like to talk about self-care. Tonight's conversation is going to deal with the topic of grief and loss, which of course can be challenging. We're going to discuss coping skills, resources, and supports, but we know this can be a difficult topic. Please take care of yourself. Reach out if you need anything. Pause for a minute, all those things. But this is also a very important topic for us to talk about. I think not only in dealing with trauma and mass violence, but also just being human. I think it's an important topic. So let's talk about the types of loss. We often think about loss or grief and loss through death, through the loss of a person that is close to us, through experiencing that. But to be honest with you, grief and I think Jill shared this, or we got it from somewhere, but grief is also things like losing your job, walking away from a sport or some activity that you enjoyed, um, or for some people, really making a big transition in life. I've worked with both professional athletes and college athletes and as a therapist, and that's a big life change when you move away from that. If you're ending a relationship, or saying goodbye to a pet, and so there's many things that we can experience in life that can lead us to feelings of grief and loss, not just the loss of a loved one. So some of the things that is important to look at is just sort of looking at loss in a different way. There not only the things that I mentioned before, but there are different types of losses. Material loss can be huge, loss of physical objects or surroundings. I was just a couple weeks ago in a FEMA training, and we were with some folks that were from Missouri, where they just have had tornadoes, and dealing with people that, have lost their property. And things like that. Relationship losses, end of an opportunity to relate. Just before our meeting today, I was meeting with a teenager. I love teenagers, but boy, do they have a lot going on, and breakups and makeups and friends, and so that can really feel so big for them. So we were talking about grief and loss. Functional loss, loss of any kind of muscular or neurological functioning. It might be due to an incident, an accident, aging, life, health, all those kind of things. Losing your role, as like social role or identity. This is an interesting loss. Intrapsychic loss. It's a loss of what might have been. It's the loss of that future. Sometimes, particularly when a relationship ends, sometimes what we're grieving is not the actual relationship, because maybe that wasn't so great, but what might have been, or could have been, or what should have been. And then we have systemic loss, which can be disturbance of a whole social system, changes in our social structure, changes that may, like when COVID or a recession, things like that. So it's important to kind of really broaden that idea of what might lead us to experience grief and loss. So let me share with you a little bit of my losses. My first major loss was actually, that's my mom and dad, pretty cute couple there. But I lost my mom in 1987 at the age of 22. But I think it was kind of interesting. I was reflecting a little bit on, why am I so interested in this area of my field? I was actually 12 when my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. To be totally honest with you, at 12, I didn't totally understand it, but lived through, obviously, her journey for 10 years. My dad passed away in 2008. Um, the picture down below is my cute family. Yes, that was a million years ago. The little boy that you see kissing his dad, is my son, Riley, who's 29 now. So he's a little bit older than he was there. He was about 2 there. And that is my late husband, Don. Don was diagnosed with a rare neuromuscular disease, and we met in college at UNLV, when we were both 20, and he was actually not supposed to live past 20, and haha, he lived to 51, so there you go. But he passed away in March of 2017. And this year my big loss was my dog Dexter. um, but I got to share, as all other folks, us therapists are not immune to sadness and loss and stress and everything everybody else experiences: jobs, friends, homes, you name it. Um, The thing is that we all experience loss throughout our lifetime. It is the human condition. This is part of being human. Being human is going to mean we are going to experience loss at some time. So it's definitely been a journey for me as well. Um, some of the things just to remember about loss, and I think in our culture we have a really different way of when somebody, particularly there's a loss, um just because a certain experience would not cause another person to experience grief, it is all right that it's causing you grief. There have been times, I remember when I left a job. I wanted to leave, I chose to leave, but I really loved the work that we were doing. And I realized, oh my gosh, this is a huge loss in my life. And everybody's like, yeah, but you didn't, you were upset. You wanted to leave. And I'm like, but I didn't want to leave the work I was doing. Um, it's very individualized. We have to know that whatever works for one person, whatever one person goes through is not what another person goes through. And the thing is that's interesting is when we experience a new loss, it can definitely activate memories of other losses. The other thing that we keep saying, my partner and I keep saying that we've had a heck of a year, and not in a good way, it seems. But one of the things that happened is the end of March, my son, that cute little 2-year-old, who's now married and has a family of his own, him and his wife moved to Omaha, Nebraska, which is kind of far away from Vegas. And unfortunately, the day after they moved, um, you know, my dog who was quite a bit older and not well, we had to make a choice to take him to the vet and say goodbye. And my brain could not figure out which thing I was more upset about. I couldn't sort it out. They were really entangled. By the way, don't tell my son that I miss the dog more, because it's true. But it kind of gets all tangled up in there, our feelings of loss, of you know what our sadness and our experiences. um they're stored in the same areas of our brain, and they're interconnected. And the ways that we experience and express our grief is very rooted in our culture, in our community, in our upbringing, in our family. Particularly in our culture, I mean, some folks are raised that you know um, you don't talk about it. It's very solemn, and that's it, and you don't really talk about your emotions. In other cultures, there is a deep sense of emotional expression. In some cultures and religions, there's particular rituals that we may engage in. So just know that the way that we experience this comes from just a variety of places. And so we may respond very differently than others because our experience growing up surrounding grief and loss was really different. I'm sure that folks have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the stages of grief. This is something that is very commonly known. The interesting part about this model is it was originally developed uh, as she was studying people who were themselves given a terminal diagnosis. And so originally, it wasn't actually developed for the loved ones. It was developed for people who were told that they had a terminal illness. But what we started to see is that this model with the stages of grief um, became very commonplace and very well known. And folks said, hey, I feel that way as well. And so the stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So with denial, there is certainly a, if you're the loved one of somebody, or let's say it's about losing a job, or let's say it's about, leaving a relationship or a relationship that ends, there may be denial. It may be, this isn't happening, this doesn't feel real, I don't want this to be the case. We may move in, be angry. Why is this happening? Sometimes people even, if they are a person who has a religious or faith base, they may be angry at God or the gods, or just angry at the universe or the world. Bargaining, there's definitely, why can't this be happening to me? I want to trade places. Depression, of course, that's sadness. And then eventually moving to a place of acceptance. And that's not saying, I'm okay that this happened. That's saying I'm accepting the reality of this happening. So that's definitely important to think about. When we look at the stages of grief, it's so important to understand that just like healing from PTSD, it's not linear. um, People bounce around between the stages. You can sometimes get to a place of acceptance, and then something happens and activates those feelings again, and you're mad all over again. So even, you just could be activated and go back to another stage. The most common places for people to sort of get stuck in their grief and loss is either in depression or anger. That is definitely something that we see with folks coming in for therapy, and folks that are really still in that place of dealing with grief and loss, even though maybe it's been many years since something occurred. So it's important to kind of also look at things that can complicate our grief. There is, of course, a difference between something that is sudden versus something that is expected. Let's think about a job change. Um, if I you walk into work and you think, okay, here we go, another Monday, and a company lays off, hundreds of people, which can happen. That is you're dealing with shock in that moment as well, versus, wow, I'm really not happy here anymore, or I think I'm going to leave the job. That doesn't mean that even when you make the choice that you're not going to experience grief and loss, but it's just that difference between what's sudden and what's expected. It is different. If our grief and loss is attached to a traumatic experience, I'm thinking about those folks where there's been floods or fires. Some of our colleagues from the Resiliency Center responded and helped out with the fires in Los Angeles. Obviously, for many people, that was very sudden and it was very traumatic. And so that can definitely complicate things and make things more difficult.
And that would
The
include
other,
our incidents.
yes, absolutely. That would completely include your all incidents of mass violence, because honestly, folks were either just doing their regular day, or you all were going to enjoy something, and a very sudden and unexpected traumatic experience occurred. Um, Grief can also be complicated if it is out of order. This is particularly true with the loss of a loved one. Um, our Even though we may still be sad and it may hurt, if we lose let's say, a grandparent who maybe lived a very long life, and you're like, okay, we can say that, and it's different. It's very different. I have worked with many families through the loss of a child, and a lot of what is being grieved, obviously, is a loss of what could have been, the loss of that future. It is out of order. Um, and the loss feels heavier, of course. And that makes total sense. And the other thing that complicates our grief can be guilt. And I know you're probably saying, guilt? Hmm? Okay, let's go into a little bit more about guilt. I found this: his fault, her fault, their fault, not me. Okay. Guilt is actually the number one thing that complicates grief. It's very fascinating. Beside, in addition to some of those other things. So sometimes when you get those things sort of stacking up, it's sudden, it's not expected, it was traumatic, it may be out of order, and I have some feelings of responsibility about it. The interesting thing about guilt and grief and loss is that often it's not true and it's not warranted. We can really engage in magical thinking about our ability to have stopped or prevented the loss. I, when I think of this, I was reflecting on a client that I worked with many years ago, and their mother was 95, maybe 96, can't remember. And her health, obviously, in an order, so to speak, that made sense, had been really declining for probably the last 10 years of her life. And when she did pass, um, her son, who an adult, obviously, was absolutely engaging in all kinds of magical thinking about what they could have done differently to prolong her life. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little confused by this, because I'm like, she passed very peacefully. She passed around, like, I couldn't, kind of think of anything. I'm like, wow, okay. What was interesting is, on the Today Show, when they used to have the thing with the jelly jar that people turned 100, my client wanted his mother to be on that jelly jar. And I'm like, oh, no, and so unfortunately, we had to really work through that magical thinking and be like, okay, not everybody's going to get to be 100. I just don't think so. That's our world. So it's important when guilt is a part of it, and it can be hard as a person to even sometimes express those thoughts, like, I want, because I kept kind of questioning, I wanted my mom to be on the jelly jar, and I'm like, what? And then I figured out what it was: the Today Show. Okay, so it's important, if you're feeling that guilt, if you're feeling that responsibility, check your thoughts out, determine, is it really true or not? and ask a trusted other, ask yourself what you would tell a friend. What would you say about that? Is that a realistic thing that you're responsible? That if only, you know, uh, my client would have done different things, would, his mom have made it to that jelly jar, Today Show thing. Okay. So what are some of the goals as we move through this journey of grief and loss? And I put this picture of the light at the end of the tunnel, hoping it's not a train coming our way. But is really the goal is learning to live even though this happened in your life. It's not something we get over. I know for many folks, particularly who've been through mass violence, or maybe you've lost a loved one or a job that you really loved or whatever it is, people often say, "Aren't you over that yet? Get over it." Okay. No, I always like to say we get over a cold. We learn to live with our losses. When we have a cold, we are sick, we feel terrible, it goes away. 5 years later, I don't, think about that cold. I don't remember it, but I definitely want to live a full life. And, you know, our timeline and our journey about dealing with our grief and loss is our own, nobody else's. Everybody is individualized. Um, so, what are some of the things that can help us through our loss? Social support. Who is in your tribe? So important. Who's around you? I love so much, and I know Jill and Alice and many people know this community that has been created through Heart, thanks to Jill and Alice. Like the connection, the social support, the understanding that happens here really is amazing. The biggest thing I can tell you is to feel your feelings. We cannot run away from them, stuff them down, numb them, or pretend that we're fine. You have to feel them. Um, Rituals and routines can help. Honoring the lost with food, music, culture, dance, and laughter, all those things. My late husband was a huge, huge, huge Star Trek fan. Huge, crazy Star Trek fan. I got my first tattoo. I don't know if you guys can see it at 52, but it's a Star Trek shield on my wrist. Um, and when we did his celebration of life, it was actually a Star Trek celebration of life. People wore the colors of the uniforms. It was pretty magical. So, whatever it is, just honor your loved one and, make sure to talk, tell stories. By honoring memories, you pass them down to the next generation. And I always think of the ocean because it's about riding the waves of your emotions and really feeling those feelings. Um, One of the things that was a little bit interesting after I experienced the loss of my husband in 2017 was I was teaching at UNLV then. And the class I was teaching was culture and diversity. And I really was excited because I love learning and sharing about different cultures. And one of the weeks, the lesson was on grief and loss. I was like, are you kidding me? So I was like, okay, universe, you're trying to teach me something. And so I really started diving into the textbook and other material because I'm a nerd. And one of the things I came across was the Buddhist way of dealing with grief and loss. And they call it sitting with your suffering. And this is a quote from Buddha: suffering is wishing things were other than they are. I was like, wow. And the idea is that instead of trying to push away grief or run away from it or not feel it, you actually kind of bring it alongside of you like a friend, like a companion. I didn't really think of it as a friend, but I don't know why. I thought of it as like a little black ball of feelings. And so when I would wake up and I would feel that, I called it a gut punch feeling, I would say to myself, okay, friend, you're here today. You're going to be my companion and come along with me. And I would also kind of say to myself, my mind and my body is doing the work today. It's working through these feelings. I need to feel them, not push them away. And it was something that, quite honestly, was a big uh, game changer for me, because I think when we experience grief and loss or trauma, and we have something that brings those feelings back up, we think, oh no, here we go again. I'm going to slide all the way back, and I'm never going to have a good day again. And I'm always going to feel this way, and I'm stuck. And the answer is no. What it really is us doing the work, doing the work that we need to do. It's like, okay, buddy, you're with me today. Come on, let's go do our day. And then the next day, it's better. And it still comes back. It still comes back because the love we have for those ones that maybe we lost is still there. So, one of the things that's amazing is, hopefully you can see this book. I can't see myself. But David Kessler worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the original developing the stages. And he wrote a book called Finding Meaning, which is about the sixth stage of grief. And I read this book as well. And I just found it really, it just spoke to me. So I wanted to share some of it with you. And the sixth stage, when talking about finding meaning, is just finding a way to sustain your love for the person after their death while you're moving forward with your life. Um, you, I think one of the things that really comes out of experiencing loss, experiencing trauma, experience mass violence, is that we really get how precious life is, how short life is. You really start to value life every day and live it to the fullest. Um, and finding meaning in a loss may take time. It may be months or years later. And loss is what happens to all of us in life. Again, this is part of the human condition. Meaning is what you make happen. And everybody's got to find their own meaning, and meaningful connections heals painful memories. I always reflect on many of the folks who are have experienced mass violence and starting scholarships and foundations, and doing all these good work and volunteering and connecting with others. I think of Jill, look what has been created here, you know, um, and and just the connections and the care and the love that you share with others, for sure. That can be something that is so important and so vital. Um, I also want to share, obviously, we talk about when there's a traumatic loss, is post-traumatic growth. Following a traumatic incident and even traumatic loss, we can have a greater sense of personal strength, um, increased exploration of existential questions like death and purpose. I had someone say to me the other day, what is my purpose here on this earth? And like, I'm thinking, if I'm just a good person, I'm doing pretty good. I'm all right, you know. And it could be different for different people. Maybe it's, raising children or grandchildren. Maybe it's, volunteering or doing work, helping others, being kind to animals, just good to each other and to the world. There may be a change in spiritual and religious areas of life, for sure. Improved relationships, new possibilities, greater appreciation, and greater compassion. I got to tell you too that besides, all the things I listed, um, one of the things that really helped me, particularly through the loss of my husband, was therapy. Going to therapy worked for me. I even did some EMDR, which is an evidence-based practice regarding just some of the more traumatic aspects. And I would say just really pushing myself and growing and just wanting to live life to the fullest, which is okay, um, to do after loss because we're here and we have a life to live. So, thank you. I would love to hear any questions, thoughts, concerns, anything. I think you guys know where to reach us and me, but I'll stop sharing and turn it back over to Jill.
Jackie, when you brought up grief, I thought about the survivor. I'm sorry, when you brought up guilt, I thought about the survivor's guilt.
Yes.
And I've
Yeah.
heard so many um people who have gone in and saved others in the middle of mass violence incident, and they feel so guilty that they couldn't have saved more because again,
Yeah.
it's their head is telling them that they should have done more. But
Right.
the fact
Right.
that they even went back, let alone, saved more than one, if that's the
Yeah.
case, is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things, and I think I've shared with folks my first experience with mass violence was 9/11, and there was a lot of magical thinking from survivors. Like that day, instead of taking the subway, it was beautiful weather. I walked, so I got to work after it already started happening, or I went this way instead of that way. And you know people certainly feel that way. And the thing is that they always say hindsight is 2020. If somebody would have told people, hey, this is going to happen at your event, your joyful fun time, you wouldn't have went. But no one did that. No one did that. It I don't know why things happen. I always say I don't know why bad things happen to good people. Someday I hope I have some person to ask that to, like, okay, tell me why. God, please, thank you. But I don't know, but they do. They do.
And wrote in the chat, gotta feel it to heal it.
That is for sure. I think particularly in our society, we think we got to get over it really fast. My experience, with my mom, with my dad, with my husband was, their loss was expected. and known. There was particularly with my husband. I mean, come on, every birthday I would joke like, do I really have to buy you a birthday present? You're not supposed to be here. I mean, that we're sick. We made a lot of jokes about it. But and so when he passed, I actually lost a 30-year friendship. And the only thing me and my therapist could figure out, because man, let me tell you, was that a year and a couple months after he passed, I wasn't over it yet. And she was ready, like, come on, let's go travel to Europe. And I was like, huh? I couldn't wrap my brain around that. And I will tell you that my grief and loss over that friendship was almost harder than the loss of my husband, because my husband I knew was going to happen. I couldn't, if you would have asked me, are you going to be friends with this person for the rest of your life? The answer would have been yes. And it was very painful, very, very painful. Now, I will tell you, talk about post-traumatic growth. I actually think losing that friend turned out to be positive in my life, because I began to get out there and push myself and go do things that maybe if I had this friend to lean on, I wouldn't have done. So, too bad you don't you get to miss out on this version of Jackie. She's a pretty good one, you know. So, yeah, that's a thing.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
One of the
Uh,
things, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Let me just go ahead and say, and then whoever wants to speak, raise your hand. We'll make sure that you get a chance to ask Jackie. Those stages of grief, I must have been exposed to those as a, I don't know, teenager. And then
Hmm.
when I actually experienced a loss, my dad died suddenly when I was 21. I realized at that point, you can cycle through those stages many, many, many different times.
Many
And
times, yeah.
even here, 44 years later, um, there's things that'll happen in life, like a birth of my grandson, and I think, oh, I'm sad. I miss my dad. I would have liked to have made this introduction.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things come up, and that I think it's important for us to realize that that is a normal part of it. And,
Yes.
you were talking about living life to the fullest. And I think that too, there are days where where we give ourselves permission to do that more so than other days. And I think that is a normal part of it. And, and we have to recognize we need to continually give ourselves permission if we kind of slide back in any way where we're trying to kind of have that magical thinking, as if I don't enjoy myself, then that makes the pain of losing them better.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So,
interesting. I had this past Mother's Day. For a long time after my mom passed away, I bonded with a friend that I worked with at the time, who also lost her mom. We used to have the We Hate Mother's Day club. And then I lost that friend to cancer. And she was very young. She was 25, I think. And then I really didn't like Mother's Day. So I've always had an issue with it, but it was funny. And this year, my boyfriend said, you seem a little gloomy. It was Mother's Day. And I said, I am. He's like, okay, what's up? And I said, well, Mother's Day has always kind of been a bummer since I lost my mom. I miss her. This was my first Mother's Day without my son here. And it was also my first Mother's Day without my dog, because I'm a dog mom. So I said, yeah, it kind of stinks. He's like, okay, you want to be in your feelings? Yep. Okay, cool. It's kind of good when a therapist gets together with a counselor. kind of works. It's nice. But yeah, and look, I've certainly lived more years without my mom than with her. Doesn't matter. I was feeling it, you know. And I binge watched some of my favorite shows and got dinner cooked for me, and I was better. Yeah. But I had to feel it.
Yeah.
All the many, many years of love. I do it all over again. 100%.
I know for me, route was also a loss of a type of innocence. You know, as an adult, you don't really think of yourself as innocent, but it was that, I should be able to go to a concert and have fun.
Yeah.
And that was lost too. So that was, and I lost who I was prior to October 1st.
Yeah. Yeah.
It gave me a completely new perspective on life, which, looking back, I've gone through a lot of growth, and it's everything has worked out, but it's you have to process that grief, that loss of who you were.
Yeah. For sure. I know that sometimes I would feel like with grief um, and loss that I felt like I was in a box, and that to live life to the fullest, I'm pushing out of that box. I'm pushing it, and it's a very active process, for sure.
So I know we've talked about this before. We got confirmation today that there are only 2 spots left open for the August 7th to 13th Triumph Over Tragedy through the On-Site Foundation. This is something that is for people who've been physically at a mass shooting. The program cost is covered through donations, so the only out-of-pocket to you is the $200 registration fee and transportation to the San Diego airport. They have a shuttle that will take you from the airport to the campus in Ramona. You must be at least 1 year post-incident. If you or anyone you know, any survivors you know, would be interested, Deanna wants, her email is deanna@theonsitefoundation.org. Can answer any questions. And you can also fill out the brief form at experienceonsite.com/onsite hyphen foundation. It's something that I know several of us here tonight have gone through, including myself, and it's definitely life changing. So I would encourage anybody who can to try to do this. So we, for the first time last week, had our first fourth Thursdays. So we just want to remind people that we now have 2 support group meetings a month, the third Tuesday of each month at 4 o'clock Pacific and 7 o'clock Eastern, and the fourth Thursday of each month at 6 o'clock Pacific and 9 o'clock Eastern. And that is facilitated by Jackie and myself. So we start usually by just kind of talking about the first Tuesdays with heart topic, and then go into anything else that's been going on in your life. And oftentimes um it's not directly having to do with our incidents, but it's how we are reacting to things in life that is directly from our incidents. So if you want to join us, you can sign up for the next meeting at withheart.eventbrite.com, or go to the Resiliency and Justice Center's calendar. And wanted to remind everyone that all of the integrative services programs offered through the Resiliency and Justice Center are available to anyone impacted by any mass violence incident. So that includes being paired one-on-one with one of our heart mentors, the mindfulness meditation, trauma recovery yoga, art therapy, and there are equine demonstrations which are in person. The others are virtual. And the equine demonstrations are in Vegas. So if you happen to be visiting Vegas and it's one of the weekends that they're doing it, please feel free to sign up. And you can get more information or register at the Resiliency and Justice Center's website on their calendar. It's just real quick what the calendar for July looks like. Anything that is not event specific, so Route 91 or UNLV, is open to anyone who's impacted by any mass violence incident. So everything yellow, green, blue is open to everyone. And if you've done the trauma recovery yoga, I just wanted to point out that there is a new time this month. It used to be in the morning and it's now in the evening. These times are all Pacific. If you'd like additional support, you can request to be paired with a heart peer mentor at resiliencyandsjustice.org/heart and click on request heart peer support. The disaster distress helpline was created for anyone impacted by natural or man-made disasters. They're open 24/7. They can walk you through if you're not sleeping, if you just need to talk to somebody in the middle of the night. So they are there. They are very used to the issues that those of us who've gone through mass violence have had. There's also a great website, Safe Space, through Vibrant. The National Mass Violence Center has tons of information for all of us who've been impacted. I would encourage you to check out their website. They also now have a virtual resiliency center at massviolence.help. There's a lot of good information. The Transcend NMVC app is amazing for all of us impacted by mass violence. Please do, if you're searching for it, include NMVC. I looked and there are other Transcend apps too, so I want to make sure that you guys get the right one. And it's their icon is the little circle that we have on here. Can't forget the 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline. Super important to remember that one. We have, if you're not a part of our First Tuesdays with Heart Facebook page, we'd encourage you to join. We post all of the recordings there for all of our First Tuesdays, and we also oftentimes have other inspirational posts from who people have been impacted. And just for fun, if you're not already on it, we have a Cooking for Post-Traumatic Growth Facebook group now as well. It's where people can post recipes, ask for recipes, share ideas. We found that cooking is quite grounding for people, so we thought we'd encourage that. Next month, super excited, we have a best-selling author, Nancy Levin, joining us. In addition to being an author, she's a master life coach and a podcast host, and she's going to be talking to us on boundaries. I don't know about you guys, but boundaries was a foreign word to me until probably about 5 years ago. And it's something I'm still really trying hard to work on, and it's not always easy. So I'm really excited to listen to what Nancy's going to be sharing with us next month. So thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate your time. If you have any questions, comments, we'd love to hear if you have any topic suggestions. Please reach out to one of us. You can also email us at heartpeer91@gmail.com. You can message us at the First Tuesdays Facebook group, or Jackie also gave her information, so feel free to reach out to Jackie if you have any questions or topics or anything. So I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, and we will see you hopefully in 2 weeks at Third Tuesdays.